really just mean to Ogerpon. I wonder if Jacob has any ways to keep that.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got into this situation. It all started when I received a mysterious DM out of nowhere on Discord. No message with context, just an invite to a server. Having never learned about basic internet safety, I clicked on it, and was brought to a server filled with content creators any Pokemon fan would be familiar with. Moxie Boosting, Pokesports, Nino Pokebros, Professor Rex, and more. We were told to wait and that an announcement will be coming soon. Well, a few weeks later, it was revealed that Beastcoast, the esports organization that Wolfie VGC, Cybertron, and James Beck are a part of, was hosting a huge Pokemon tournament at Brookland, a venue in New York City, and I knew that I just had to take it down. I figured I'd use my Pittsburgh team as a base and go from there. Yeah, alright, that didn't work, so back to the drawing board. After Pittsburgh, I knew I wanted to play Iron Hands Amoonguss. It's a core that I have a lot of experience with, and I'm just really comfortable with it, but I needed to wait until we knew the rest of the format before I started going too deep. Once the DLC was released, it was time to start cooking. There was a ton of new tools, weather setters like Politoed and Ninetales, old staples like Milotic, tech pieces like Weezing, not to mention the new legendaries Ogerpon, and the other three who kinda suck, but whatever. I went through a lot of teams, but I pretty quickly realized that every team I was even a little happy with had a core of Choice Scarf Landorus Therian, Choice Specs Fluttermane, Assault Vest Iron Hands, and Fire Ogerpon. These four, with various different sets, seemed to do well on Tailwind offense or as a balanced team, and things were looking good. I entered a pretty big online tournament with the Tailwind version, and I bombed hard. Usually, I think I lose pretty gracefully, but for some reason on that day, I was taking it bad. Maybe because I was afraid of having 2 bad results in a row. Stupidly, I swore off the team I was working on altogether. I convinced myself I was bad at the format and needed something linear. Something I wouldn't have to adjust too much on the fly. So, I tried the hard Trick Room team that Jesse VGC used to come in second at another big online tournament, queued up into another event, and... oh no. At this point, I started to panic. It was only 4 days until the tournament, and nothing felt good. I said to myself, if I bring something wacky and off the wall, maybe I'll get the surprise factor. And that's a Pokemon like Overquill, Salamence, Clefairy, and Tinkaton ended up in my team builder. Thankfully, Yotam and Chuppa were able to collectively talk me down, and Yotam suggested I play Michael their Best's team that he had used in an online tournament that past weekend. Michael came in second at Worlds this year, so I knew the concepts had to be good. Plus, it had a lot of the Pokemon that I felt comfortable with. Amoonguss, Iron Hands, Fluttermane, Landorus, Fire Ogerpon, and Iron Bundle. Bundle isn't a Pokemon I have a lot of experience with, but given how well it lines up into Landorus Therian, I thought it made a lot of sense. There was just one thing bothering me. How does this team ever beat Hard Trick Room with Indian Armor? I DM'd Mikkel on Twitter to see if he had some guidance for me, and it came down to just get turn 1 right. Not the answer I was hoping for, but sometimes you just have to accept that your team has a bad matchup you might need to dodge. I didn't feel super comfortable with the team. Between work and preparing to actually spend the weekend in the city, I was basically out of time. I wasn't super happy with my prep, but I was happy I followed the first rule of team building: use good Pokemon. Iron Bundle, to keep speed control with Icy Wind and punish Landorus Therian for my opponents. Iron Hands, to give my team a bulky backbone, provide fake out support, and threaten to Oko my opponent's frailer Pokemon. Amoonguss, to keep my other Pokemon alive and disrupt my opponent's strategies with Clear Smog and Spore. Fluttermane, to deal huge damage. Landorus Therian, to weaken my opponent's physical attackers and deal good damage. And finally, the new toy, Hearthflame Ogerpon, to deal absolutely insane damage with Terrifier, Ivy Cudgel, and to punish opponents playing passively with Swords Dance. With what was surely the biggest hurdle to success at the tournament out of the way, I was ready for Saturday, and then...
Right now, 23 million people in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut are under flood watches, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul has declared a state of emergency.
The day before the event, huge parts of New York City and Long Island flooded. I was convinced that there was no way I'd still be going, but the Beastcoast folks insisted the event would be open, so I swam to Brooklyn to play in the event. Checked in, looked in my Round 1 opponent, and... it was Yotam. Yotam is the person I probably had the most meaningful practice with for this event. So, it's pretty funny to play him round 1. He's also just a very good player. I couldn't have gotten a much harder round 1 if I tried. He was playing a balanced team with Farigiraf, Heatran, Rillaboom, Urshifu Rapid Strike, Landorus Therian, and Jinpao. Both games, Yotam tried to get me to Trick Room early to whittle away at me with his Heatran and Farigiraf, so he could clean up with his faster threats in the late game. But I was able to leverage Iron Hands, Landorus, and Amoonguss to stall out his Trick Room and take out his more aggressive pieces. What a no. If my first round was going to be that tough, I can't imagine what's going to happen next. My next opponent was playing another version of Farigiraf Balance. I just went for the same stuff I did against Yotam, and it went pretty smoothly, 2-0. Round 3 was against a pretty unique team of Galarian Moltres, Iron Hands, Fluttermane, Landorus Therian, Sinistra, and Fire Ogerpon. The combination of Galar Moltres and Sinistra seemed really scary, because Hospitality can heal Moltres, so it gets its Berserk special attack boost over and over and over again. If I wanted to beat this team, I had to be aggressive. Usually, Sinistra packs Trick Room, so I wouldn't be able to just outspeed their team, but my opponent had opted for Shadow Ball instead. This let me take advantage of Iron Bundle to always be in control of the speed, and therefore always be in control of the pace of the game. I win the set 2-1, 3-0 now. My round 4 opponent had a team of Chi-Yu, Landorus Therian, Fluttermane, Iron Hands, Sinistra, and Urshifu Single Strike. This match ended really quickly. Both games, we just sort of traded damage back and forth for 3 or 4 turns. Luckily for me, my opponent's Iron Hands was Terra Water instead of Terra Fire, which means I could bully it with my Ogerpon to win both games. 4-0. My next opponent was a friend of mine, Noah. Noah has a very specific style he likes to play. He loves Annihilate, he loves setup moves, and this team was no different. Hisuian Gudra, Annihilate, Hisuian Arcanine, Cresselia, Grimmsnarl, and Urshifu Rapid Strike. Our match got to be on stream. I knew from the start that I needed to leverage my Amoonguss and Swords Dance Ogerpon to stop Noah from getting the setup he wants so badly. But in game 1, I play extremely passively and give him all the room he needs. But I did have a way to win. In the middle of the game, I went for Clear Smog and Heavy Slam into his Terra Fairy Cresselia, who just barely held on. But if I had gone for Clear Smog into my own Iron Hands and Heavy Slammed, I would have knocked out the Cresselia and been left with an Amoonguss and Trick Room, which likely would have won me the game. My Iron Hands had 2 physical attack drops, so I would have done more damage by using Clear Smog to erase them than by just using the Clear Smog to hurt Cresselia. But that's not what happened, so I was down a game. Game 2 honestly went pretty similarly, but a well-timed crit from Ogerpon's Ivy Cudgel bailed me out. I had to get lucky to win, but by then I knew what I had to do. Because Noah's team is so full of setup Pokemon, it's extremely hard in the early game for him to have Pokemon that exert pressure on the field. So I punished that. I led my 2 most dangerous Pokemon, Fluttermane and Ogerpon, forcing Noah to play extremely defensively and switch into his Goodra. From there, I let him Heavy Slam my Fluttermane, get a Amoonguss in, and now I had him right where I wanted. I used Spore and Rage Powder to allow my Ogerpon to set up Swords Dance not once, not twice, but 3 times, meaning I could sweep through Noah's entire team with big ol' Ivy Cudgel bonks, winning me the set, putting me at 5-0, and securing my place in day 2.
Like, honestly, for game 3, we did not catch on to your strategy until like a few turns after you started with it. We were like, oh, look at that.
I'm glad it worked out, because I don't know if that's because I got lucky or because it was actually a good play.
But in these Swiss-style tournaments, even if you're guaranteed to make 2, you have to keep focused, because a loss today could bite me in the ass tomorrow. My next opponent was Ben Grismer, a player known for his unique teams, and calling this team unique was putting it lightly. Farigiraf, Urshifu Dark, Mousehold, Torkoal, Ursaluna, and Oranguru. The combination of Farigiraf and Focus Sash Follow Me Friendguard Mousehold is nearly impossible for my team to deny Trick Room against. But I sure tried in game 1, failed miserably, and lost in 3 turns. I needed to adapt. I can't stop him from getting Trick Room up, so I need to stall it out. The 2 Pokemon Ben leads, Mousehold and Farigiraf, don't let him actually put on pressure without switching around. So I went for a more passive turn 1. I let Amoonguss and Ogerpon and go for Swords Dance and Spore into his Mousehold. This guarantees that on the first turn of Trick Room, either Mousehold will be asleep, it will still be on the field because it taunted my Amoonguss, or whatever he switched Mousehold into will be asleep. This new line, plus a little luck with my sleep turns, was enough for me to take the next 2 games. 6-0 now. At 6-0, this is my best start in a tournament ever, and I feel like nothing can stop me. I look at who my next round opponent is, and oh no. Remember when I said this team had a really hard time into Indeedee Armarouge? Well, Tom Hayden is Mr. Trick Room, and he's already beaten some of the best players in this tournament. We sit down to play our match, and I lose. Tom is a friend, so I'm not upset at all for him to be my only loss of day 1. But I'm sure if I want to make it to top 8, I'm gonna have to figure out some way to play this matchup. At the start of the next day, only the top 32 players are allowed to advance. At 6-1, I have a great start, but I'm still not guaranteed to make it to the final stage of the tournament. I'll have to win at least 3 of my next 5 matches if I want to advance. Hey, by the way, if you like this video, subscribe. My first opponent of day 2 is Grant. He's packing a team of Roaring Moon, Urshifu Rapid Strike, Hearthflame Ogerpon, Shinpao, Rillaboom, and Golden Go. Usually against Tailwind teams, I can leverage Iron Bundle plus Iron Hands to stop them from getting out of control and stall out their Tailwind. But because Grant's Tailwind setter is Roaring Moon, that won't work as well. Roaring Moon puts way more offensive pressure on than Tornadus, so I have to adapt. I make aggressive reads in both games, calling switches and trying to keep tempo with redirection and fake out. I managed to win the set 2-0. Only 2 more wins to go. My next opponent is Tom. Again, hard Trick Room. my worst matchup. But this time, I have a plan. I lead Ogerpon and Amoonguss. I can just Swords Dance with Ogerpon, Spore the Indeedee when he clicks Follow Me in Trick Room, and sweep from there because Armarouge won't one-shot Ogerpon without Helping Hand. But Tom sees right through my plan, clicks Hellback and Expanding Force on turn 1, and double knocks out both my Pokemon, winning game 1 in just 2 turns. I need a new plan. I lead Landorus, Therian, and Amoonguss. This lead forces Tom to make some weird decisions, and risks me Rock Slide flinching him out of the game. I get some lucky flinches and spores off, and manage to pull it out. I go for the same plan in game 3, and I get there. Not the cleanest win, but for what should be an auto-loss matchup, I'm not gonna complain. I only need one more to win. Next up is Brian Hume, a regional champion and all-around great player. He's packing Swords Dance Kingambit, Scarf Landorus Therian, Choice Specs Chi-Yu, Speed Booster Fluttermane, Wellspring Ogerpon, and Assault Vest Iron Hands. Brian's Kingambit causes me a lot of trouble in the first game, so I adjust and leave Landorus at home in game 2, and it lets me tie up the match, but I'm left at a crossroads in game 3. Do I predict Brian will leave Kingambit at home after it didn't work for him in the second game, or do I think he'll stick with the same plan? Ultimately, I pick my 4 Pokemon assuming he will bring Kingambit, he doesn't, and I lose the set. I'm starting to sweat now. I only have 2 shots left to guarantee I make top cut, and my next opponent will be no easy win. James Evans, a former world champion. James's team is pretty interesting, with Gastrodon, Cresselia, Iron Hands, Urshifu Single Strike, Landorus Therian, and Hisuian Arcanine. James tries to build a game plan centered around Urshifu Single Strike both games. The combination of Iron Hands and Landorus Therian makes it difficult for James to execute his game plan, and I win 2-0. I'm locked for top 8 at this point, but I have one more match before that, against Justin Tang. When we sit down to play, I realize something. I get nothing from beating Justin in this set, so maybe I can get something else by losing. I intentionally bring leads and play in a way I don't think I would during a set that mattered, in an attempt to gain as much information as possible about Justin's team. I learned a few things, like that his Kingambit was slower than my Iron Hands. I was sure this would come in handy if we played again at Top Cut. And, after a quick break, top 8 pairings go up, and I'm up against James Evans, a rematch. I figure I won pretty convincingly in the Swiss rounds, so I can just do the same thing again, right? I go for the same Iron Hands Landorus Therian lead I brought both games in Swiss, and James leads Iron Hands Cresselia. Looks like a repeat of the Swiss round so far, until James switches out his Iron Hands for Landorus Therian. James didn't bring Landorus in either game last time, but this time around, he uses both his Intimidators in Landorus and Arcanine really well and shuts down my Ogerpon, and I lose game 1. I adjust for game 2 and bring Iron Bundle. Give me more ways to threaten his Intimidators, and more room to set up my Swords Dance Ogerpon. This adjustment works out, and I win game 2. Game 3 starts with my Iron Hands and Iron Bundle against his Iron Hands and Cresselia. I make a really aggressive play on turn 1, switching my Ogerpon in for my Iron Hands. But James doubled up into that slot, and I take a lot of damage. And I get punished even further when Cresselia drops my Ogerpon's special defense, meaning it won't be able to live another Psychic. My risky play going so wrong gets me a little flustered, and I make a huge mistake. I try to Rage Powder Psychic away from my Overpon, but James's Cresselia has safety goggles, ignores the redirection, and my Ogerpon goes down. Without Ogerpon, I don't really have a way left to win. I'm eliminated from the tournament in top 8. James makes it all the way to the finals, where he eventually loses to Grant, person I played in the first round of Day 2 Swiss. This event was a ton of fun, and I learned a lot from it. It feels like all my practice is finally paying off. A huge thank you to the TO of the tournament, RX Painkiller, Brookland for hosting, and Beastcoast for running the event. And thank you to all the friends, new and old, I spent the weekend with. Thanks for watching, bye.